I was in the middle of a long trip, around 3 in the morning, when something strange happened. I was on I-80, one of those deserted highways that cross the United States, and the road was empty. This isn't unusual, after all, I'm a truck driver and I'm used to these crazy schedules. The light from the headlights cut through the endless darkness, and the sound of the engine made that monotonous echo in the silence. But then, out of nowhere, I saw something that made me grip the steering wheel harder. A truck stopped on the side of the road. It was strange, because on that part of the road there was no gas station or rest area. The truck was completely out of place. I was still a considerable distance away, but I could already see that the vehicle was old. It looked like an old model, but it was sitting in an unusual way, almost as if it had been left there for nothing. I didn't see anyone around, but something about the scene made me uneasy, like I was being watched, you know? I sped up, but suddenly, something made me slow down. Something told me I needed to look closer. I stopped the truck about 20 meters from the stopped vehicle. As I got closer, I saw that the cabin was slightly open, and the door was shaking slightly, as if someone had left in a hurry. I didn't hear any sound coming from the truck, but a strange warm sensation came over my face. The cabin was hot, as if someone had just left. It wasn't possible, because the temperature that night was cold, and I knew that heat wasn't normal. I stood there, not knowing what to do, looking at the interior of the cabin that seemed so empty, but at the same time so present. Fear began to tighten in my chest, so, without thinking much, I looked around once again. There was no sign of life, but the environment seemed too strange to simply ignore. I could almost feel eyes on me, like someone was watching me, waiting for me to do something. Maybe it was tiredness, or maybe a feeling of paranoia taking over me, but, at that moment, I decided to continue my journey. My instinct told me not to get more involved than necessary. So I started the truck again and drove away, but that heat still lingered on my skin. Something wasn't right. Something in that place was watching me. I continued my journey, but honestly, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The road seemed even emptier than before, and the loneliness, which was already part of my job, now seemed much more suffocating. I even tried to distract myself by playing louder music, but the silence of the road had a pressure that made the sound of the music disappear, as if the air itself had become dense. Every turn, every mile seemed more endless, and I started to get paranoid. Those images of the hot cabin, the door shaking, were coming back to me. I looked in the rearview mirror, expecting to see that truck following me, but there was nothing. The road behind me was empty, as silent as the road ahead. But even so, the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. I started to feel like there was someone, or something, accompanying me every mile that passed. Sometimes a distant light would appear in the rearview mirror, but then disappear. I tried to convince my mind that it was just the reflection of my own headlights, but the tension only increased. I wasn't alone on the road, I was sure of that. And it wasn't just the feeling. Something was there, watching me. That feeling only got worse after another hour of travel. I was already thinking about stopping at a gas station, or even going to the next village, to take a breather and have a coffee. But then, out of nowhere, I saw something else that made me freeze for a second. On the side of the road, in a spot where there was nothing before, I saw a dark silhouette, a tall shadow. I stood still for a moment, unable to believe what I was seeing. When I blinked, she was gone. But for some reason, I couldn't look away. I had the feeling that she wasn't there by chance, that all of this was connected somehow. That's when I realized I was driving faster than normal, but I couldn't slow down. The idea of going back and checking if the truck was really abandoned, or if there was something else I should have seen, tormented me. But I couldn't, I didn't want to. I knew something was pulling me back to that place. It was as if the road itself was enticing me to return. And that's when, for the first time in a long time, I felt the real fear of not being able to control the situation anymore. Something was happening, and I didn't know what it was. That's when I saw something I shouldn't have seen. As I rounded a bend, I noticed a gleam in the corner of my eye. I quickly glanced at the rearview mirror, and it was as if everything froze for a moment. I saw, reflected in the window of my truck, the image of the abandoned truck, only it was right behind me, just a few meters away, with the cabin now completely lit up. But the strangest thing was that the door, which had been swinging before, was closed, and there was no one there. I didn't see another car behind me. I didn't see anything other than the road. I was all alone, and that truck had just appeared. I looked ahead, trying to ignore it, but dread overcame me. That feeling of being watched now became oppressive. I felt like someone was there, inside the truck, watching my every move. The heat in the cabin still seemed to envelop me, as if it were filled with a strange presence, something impossible to describe. I didn't know if my mind was playing tricks on me because of tiredness or if something was really happening, but I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer alone on the road. When I finally saw the gas station on the horizon, relief washed over me. I didn't want to stop, but I knew I needed to. I needed a break, something to take me out of this moving nightmare. I parked in one of the spaces and got out, shaking. There was no longer any sign of the truck. But the heat of the environment still seemed to follow me, and the sound of something dragging the tires from the road was so clear in my mind that it seemed to still be there, chasing me. I never went down that road again, and I don't even know if I will ever be able to understand what happened that night. But since then, whenever I find myself on a nighttime drive, I look in the mirrors and feel that shiver down my spine. I don't know if it was my mind or if something really followed me down that road, but the feeling never went away. And in some ways, I don't know if I want to know the answer. I just know that, somehow, what happened that night, there was no explanation. I was alone on the road, as always, at that damn early hour, where everything seems quieter and darker. Those long trips in the middle of nowhere make me think that the world is all about me and the sound of the truck engine cutting through the silence. I was on I-40, somewhere between nothing and everything, when something made me look in the rearview mirror. I had just rounded a bend when I saw a bright light approaching fast. I thought it was another truck, but something about its speed seemed off. It was too fast, even for such an empty road. I had that feeling of restlessness, you know. Something wasn't right. I looked in the mirror again, but this time, what I saw made me freeze. It was a figure, a dark silhouette, sitting in the back seat of my own truck. She was there, motionless, with such a strong presence that it almost seemed like she was watching me. I blinked and tried to focus, but the figure didn't move. I don't know if it was tiredness getting to me, but it sent shivers down my spine. All I could think was, it can't be real. At that moment, fear consumed me in a way I didn't know how to deal with. I gripped the steering wheel so hard that my hands started to hurt, and instinctively I hit the brakes, stopping the truck in the middle of the deserted road. The engine roared, and the only thing I could hear besides it was the beat of my own heart. What the hell was that? I didn't know, but I felt like I needed to look back to confirm that it wasn't an illusion. But when I looked, the figure was gone. The back seat was empty, as it should be. The air was thick, and I remained there, standing in the middle of the road, not knowing what to do. I didn't see the other vehicle approaching, and as much as I tried to convince my mind that it was just a reflection of my own shadow, something inside me said no. The feeling of being watched, that strange presence, has not gone away. I could still feel the tension in the air, as if something was waiting for me. The idea of continuing the journey seemed unbearable, but I knew I couldn't stay there forever. So, with one last look at the empty back seat, I put the truck back on the road, but that feeling of terror didn't leave me. I kept going, but each kilometer felt heavier than the last. The deserted road and the darkness around made the silence even more suffocating. I often looked in the rearview mirror, hoping to see that figure again, but what disturbed me most was the fact that I couldn't remember if I had actually seen something or if my mind had created it. But the feeling that someone was with me in the truck, watching me, didn't leave me. It was as if fear had settled into my body, making every movement seem more difficult. The strange thing is that even though I was completely alert, the road seemed emptier than ever. No other lights on the horizon, no sounds from outside, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my breathing. I looked in the mirror again, but now it was as if the figure had been engraved there, in that reflection. I no longer felt like I was alone on the road, and every time I looked in the rearview mirror, the fear tightened my grip, as if I was going to see that again. But what really made me paranoid was what happened next. Suddenly, without warning, something moved in the mirror. It wasn't like before, a figure in the back seat. Now, it was a shadow that was dragging, almost as if something was dragging inside the truck, but at the same time it didn't make any noise. I almost stopped breathing when I saw that, and panic took over me. The feeling of being watched, surrounded, became unbearable. The mirror reflected that shadow, but there was nothing physically there. I could no longer look in the mirror without feeling a chill all over my body. I knew it didn't make sense, but the feeling that something was moving behind me didn't leave me. Without thinking, I jerked the steering wheel hard and stopped again, in the middle of the road. My body was shaking, and I tried with all my might to look behind the bench. Everything was empty. There was nothing there, nothing I could see with my eyes, but the fear was so strong that it was as if I felt an invisible presence. I didn't know what else to do, but panic was rising inside me. I looked to the sides of the road, but the darkness seemed to close in even more. I wasn't alone, I was sure of that. I just didn't know what was there, or what I wanted. I don't know how long I stood there in the middle of the road, but the feeling that someone was watching me never went away. The pressure in my chest increased with every second, and it felt like the air was thicker, hotter, as if the darkness had become something palpable. I knew I needed to keep going, but the fear of looking in the rearview mirror paralyzed me. The worst thing was that the road seemed to have no end, and every kilometer I drove only intensified the feeling that I was being followed, that invisible presence was with me. When I finally decided to resume my journey, the silence was even more oppressive, and the road before me seemed longer than ever. I was sure the truck wasn't empty, that something was there, hidden in the shadows. I could no longer look back without feeling that suffocating fear taking over me. But at the same time, I didn't want to stop again, I didn't want to give space to that feeling anymore. So I moved on, forcing my mind to ignore what it couldn't understand. It was then that, further ahead, I found a gas station. It was the kind of place I would normally avoid, but at this moment it felt like a relief, a refuge from what was haunting me. I stopped, turned off the truck's lights, and, for a moment, I remained silent, trying to gather the strength to get down and move away from that vehicle. But the feeling that something was there, watching me, didn't disappear. I looked to the sides of the road, but I didn't see anything. The station was empty, and the dim light from the blinking lamp did nothing to dispel the fear I felt. When I got out of the truck and entered the store, the only thing I could do was look back at the reflection of the road in the window of the door. And there, in the reflection, I saw the figure again. Not in the back seat, but now behind me, watching me in the darkness, motionless, his eyes fixed on me. I quickly turned around, but there was nothing. Nothing but the empty road, the moon lighting up the night. But the feeling of being watched, that presence was there, never disappeared. I don't know if I was going crazy or if something really happened on that road, but to this day, I've never been able to forget what I saw, or rather, what I felt. And every time I hit the road at night, I can't help but look in the rearview mirror, hoping to see that one more time. It was a moonless night, and the only sound that filled the road was the roaring engine of my truck. I was traveling down one of those country roads where you barely see another soul and the asphalt seems to go on forever. The darkness there is so deep you can almost touch it, but that night, something was different. I was looking out the window, trying to keep my eyes open, when something caught my eye. A light. Bright. It was ahead, floating in the middle of the road. It wasn't another car's headlight, nor just any light bulb. It was an intense light, as if it were almost alive. At first I thought it was some kind of flare, maybe an emergency light or something. But what made me uncomfortable was that as I got closer, the light wouldn't stay in place. She walked away, moving slowly forward, as if she were guiding me. It was as if he was inviting, or challenging, to continue. I looked around, but I didn't see anything. No other lights. No other sounds. Just the light in front of me, as if I were the only living being in those dead hours of the night. I sped up a little, trying to get closer to the light, curious to find out what it was. Every time I got closer, she seemed to get even further away, taking me down a road I didn't recognize. The passing signs seemed older, and the vegetation around them seemed different, denser. I didn't know if it was the tiredness or the light itself, but something was making me nervous. The road twisted and turned, without me having been that way before. But for some reason, the light continued ahead, as if it were guiding me to some unknown place. And that's when I noticed something even stranger. The road seemed to be getting darker. As if the light, instead of illuminating, was erasing everything around it. I tried in vain to look around, but the darkness seemed to swallow everything. The light was getting further and further away, and the more I tried to get closer, the further away it went. I was already starting to wonder if I was just seeing things, or if something was actually happening. My mind was screaming at me to stop, but my feet kept pressing the accelerator, as if I was being carried by an invisible force. The road in front of me seemed to stretch into infinity, and I no longer knew how much time had passed. The only reference point was that light, which now seemed smaller, but still undisturbed. I didn't know where I was going, but it felt like I had no choice. Every turn I took seemed more wrong, more strange, as if that road was no longer the same. I was in a place I didn't know, and as much as I tried to convince myself that it was just an illusion, something in my chest told me that there was something more there. Something that could not be explained. I continued following the light, completely absorbed by it. Fear began to consume me. It was as if the light had a magnetic force, an attraction that was impossible to resist. I looked to the sides of the road, but all I saw was total darkness. The surrounding vegetation was dense and looked increasingly strange. There were trees that didn't fit in with the environment, some crooked, others without leaves, as if they were in a state of decomposition. But I couldn't stop. I needed to know what was going on. I needed to understand what that was. And that's when the light started to do something even stranger. Suddenly, she turned a bend, and I followed behind, without thinking, without hesitation. The road was increasingly difficult to see, as if something was interfering with the light from my own truck. But that light in front of me continued to guide me, moving away and approaching in ways that made no sense. The feeling of losing control of the situation only increased. I was starting to doubt my own sanity. Then, without warning, the light disappeared. As if she had been swallowed by darkness. I came to a screeching halt, tires screeching on the asphalt. What happened? Where did the light go? The road in front of me was completely dark, and I could only hear the sound of my own heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, but there was nothing else. There was no sign that anything had passed there, as if that moment had been erased. I took a deep breath and tried to understand what was happening, but nothing made sense. Fear paralyzed me, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should go back, if I should continue. I just knew that whatever happened on that road shouldn't have happened. I couldn't decide what to do. The darkness seemed to swallow me, and the strange feeling of being watched increased with every second. The light I had followed seemed to have taken away all sense of reality. I tried turning on the radio to distract myself, but there was no signal. Everything was completely silent. Fear, now a constant presence, told me something wasn't right. Something that couldn't be explained, but was happening as real as anything else. But I knew I couldn't continue there, standing in the middle of the road. With my heart racing, I started the truck and decided to go back. I tried to find some landmark, anything that would make me feel safer, but the road felt like a maze now. The signs were out of place, the landmarks I should have recognized were no longer there. I was in a place that didn't exist on the map. The light I had followed was gone, and the only sound now was the sound of the truck's engine, like a silent companion to my paranoia. What made me even more uneasy was that, after a few kilometers, I realized that the road didn't seem to end. I had been to that point before. Desperation began to take over me. I wasn't going back. I was stuck there, and the road, with its strange curves, didn't seem to let me escape. The light was gone, but the feeling of being pulled toward something invisible, something that wasn't human, remained. I no longer knew if I was dreaming or if there was really something supernatural happening there. Eventually I gave up trying to understand and just moved on, until at some point the road opened up. I found a rest point, a small village, and stopped. I didn't look back. I didn't look in the mirror. Whatever had happened on that road, I knew I shouldn't look for answers. I would never go back that way again. And, to this day, I don't know what that light was, what that road was, or what took me there. But on every trip I've taken since then, I look at the horizon, hoping I won't see that light again, hoping it will never find me again. I had been on the road for hours, the darkness outside was absolute, and the only sound I could hear was the constant hum of the truck's engine and the headlights cutting through the night. It was a lonely trip, another one of those trips where you end up getting lost in your own thoughts. The deserted road seemed endless. There were no other cars, just the asphalt stretching as far as the eye could see. Everything was so quiet I could almost hear the silence tightening in my chest. That's when I saw her. In the middle of the road, standing like a statue, was a child. She was alone, completely alone. It was difficult to see his face from a distance, but I could see that he was wearing simple clothes, as if he were a child from a humble family. At first, I thought it was an illusion caused by tiredness, but the child was there, standing in the middle of the road, completely still. There was nothing else around. The darkness seemed to swallow everything except her. I slowed down automatically, the brakes squeaking as I slowed. My heart started to race as I approached the child. Something was wrong, very wrong. It didn't make sense for a child to be alone at this time, in the middle of an empty road. I stopped the truck a few meters away from her and looked around, but there was no sign of anyone else, not even houses or cars. Just the road and that child standing still, as if he was waiting for something. I didn't know what to do, but the feeling that something wasn't right overcame me. I got out of the truck, trying to calm my breathing, but the feeling of restlessness only increased. I walked towards the child, asking, without really expecting an answer, if he was lost. When he was just a few steps away from her, the child, his face still difficult to make out, quickly turned around. His eyes were empty, lifeless, as if they didn't belong to a real child. I stopped. The air felt heavy, as if it had grown thicker, and a biting cold enveloped me. Before I could react or take a step forward, the child simply disappeared. He didn't run, he didn't hide. She just disappeared, as if she had never been there. I stood there, in the middle of the road, completely still, trying to process what had just happened. There was no sign that the child had gone anywhere, no sound, no movement. The road was empty except for me and the feeling of dread that was beginning to spread across my skin. I looked at the place where the child was, as if waiting for him to come back, but nothing happened. What the hell was that? How could someone just disappear like that? I was starting to question my sanity, but at the same time, the feeling that something was wrong couldn't be ignored. My head swam as I slowly walked back to the truck. Fear tightened my chest and the air felt heavier, as if the night had closed in around me. I wanted to get out of there, continue my journey and leave this behind, but I couldn't. Something told me that I shouldn't leave, that I should investigate further, look more closely. But at the same time, my intuition was screaming at me to get back in the truck and just drive away, away from that road, away from that feeling. I finally got into the truck, still looking at the spot where the child was. The darkness felt thicker now, as if it were expanding, swallowing the road in front of me. I looked in the rearview mirror, hoping to see some sign that the child was still there, but the mirror only reflected the empty road. I started the truck, accelerating, but a strange feeling accompanied me, as if I were being followed. I looked at the mirrors, hoping to see some movement, but nothing. The road remained deserted, but that feeling of being watched didn't leave me. That night stayed with me for days, following me like a shadow. I tried to convince myself that it was just my mind playing with my nerves, that the tiredness and isolation of the road had played tricks on me. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw those empty eyes, that expressionless face. I never went down that road again. Even when the need to take that route arose, I always found an excuse to avoid it. Something about that road left me feeling like I should never have stopped, that the child should never have been seen. But what scares me most is that, to this day, I don't know if that was real or if it was something much more supernatural. I tried not to think about it, to move on as if it were just a passing memory, but the truth is I could never really shake that feeling. What happened on that road was engraved in my mind, like a mark that won't come off no matter how hard I try. Every time I hit the road at night, I get this strange feeling, like I'm being watched, like that child, or something else, is waiting for me. I look to the side of the road, try to keep my eyes on the horizon, but something always pulls me to look in the rearview mirror. I know it's ridiculous, but the feeling that she's still there, waiting, has never left me. As if, somehow, the road had become a forbidden place for me. No matter how many times I drive by it, something inside me says that the child has never disappeared, that it is simply waiting for the right moment to show itself again. Each trip becomes heavier, more difficult, as if that encounter had left a mark on my soul that I can't erase. The strangest thing is that after that incident, I never heard anything about disappearances, no story about a child on the road. No one else seemed to notice anything. I searched everywhere, looking for an explanation, but nothing. No news, no warning. Just an uncomfortable silence. That could have been a hallucination, but something inside me tells me it wasn't. Something supernatural, something beyond my understanding, happened there. Something that I can't control, but that, somehow, I feel is always present when I travel. I know what I saw that night is something I can never explain, but to this day, whenever I pass by a deserted road, fear sets in. I look around, try to convince myself that I'm safe, but something inside me knows that if I stop again, maybe that child, or something even worse, will be waiting for me. And I ask myself, will I have the courage to go down that road again, or will I always feel like I'm being watched, like those terrifying times when I found the child on the road? It was a night like any other, but there was something strange about that road. I was driving through an isolated stretch where the lights of the cities had long since been left behind. The sky was clear, but the darkness around seemed immense, endless. There were no other vehicles on the road, and the sound of the engine was the only noise that filled the truck's cabin. I was starting to feel tired, but I was trying to stay alert. That's when I heard it. It was a whisper. Low, almost imperceptible, coming from outside, from the darkness. At first I thought it was the wind, but the sound seemed so clear, so crisp, like someone was talking, right there, next to my truck. I quickly glanced at the mirrors, but the road was empty. Not a soul in sight. No lights. Just darkness, which seemed to spread more and more. I looked to the side to see if anything had moved, but everything was silent. The whisper persisted, quieter now, but still there. What made me even more uneasy was that, even without seeing anyone, I felt like I was being watched. The feeling that something was there, hidden in the darkness, watching my every move. The whisper seemed to have an intention, a presence. I looked outside, through the truck window, but everything was quiet. So, without thinking much, I stopped the truck on the side of the road. Maybe I was going crazy, but I needed to know what was going on. I needed to see for myself if there was anyone out there. I got out of the truck and stood there, listening. The whispering continued, but now it seemed to come from inside my head. The sensation was even more disconcerting, as if the words were echoing in my brain, messing with my sanity. I looked around, but I saw nothing, just darkness swallowing the road. The air was thick, and the feeling of being watched only increased. I couldn't understand what was happening, but one thing was certain, something was there. Something was trying to reach me, and I didn't know if it was real or just my mind playing tricks on me. I was completely paralyzed, not knowing what to do. The night seemed to have become thicker, more dense, as if the air itself was charged with something strange. The whisper was louder now, it felt like it was in my head, whispering incomprehensible words, like a language I didn't recognize. I looked around, behind me, but there was nothing. Nothing but the darkness that swallowed the road in front of me. Fear began to take over me, as if that voice was trying to confuse me, to lose me in a nightmare. I no longer knew if I was awake or if it was all a hallucination. I got in the truck again, trying to calm down. The engine was running, but the silence around was so profound that I felt as if the road was being swallowed by darkness. I started and accelerated, but the whisper wouldn't leave me alone. It was there, inside my mind, growing stronger by the second. It was as if someone was speaking directly into my ear, but when I looked in the rearview mirror or out the windows, there was nothing. I started to feel a growing headache, as if someone was trying to control me, to force me to listen to that sound. The road in front of me seemed longer and longer, more endless. I didn't know if I was becoming paranoid, or if something was really there, trying to communicate with me in a way I couldn't understand. The feeling of discomfort only increased, and the whisper was now like pressure inside my head, pushing me over the edge. I looked at the headlights, trying to focus on the road, but the darkness seemed to swallow everything around me. And yet, that whisper continued, surrounding me, enveloping me. I stopped again, heart pounding in my chest. What scared me most wasn't the fact that I didn't see anyone, but what those voices were trying to tell me. I knew I was losing my mind, but the feeling that something was approaching, that something was somewhere, watching, making me hear it, wouldn't leave me alone. I looked around once again, completely scared, but the only sound now was my own heartbeat, mixed with that empty echo in my head. Something was happening there, and I didn't know if I could escape. The road seemed like an endless maze, and the whisper continued, like a curse, a presence that followed me. I could no longer understand what was happening. The whisper was now so present in my mind that it seemed to mix with the sounds of the road itself, as if it were invading my thoughts. The feeling that something was there, right next to me, was palpable. I looked at the road ahead, but it seemed to never end, always stretching, a dead end, as if the road itself had been made to trap me there. I knew I needed to keep going, but something inside me said it would be worse. I started the truck again, but now, the feeling that I was being taken to some unknown place intensified. The whisper turned into a voice, clear and definitive, but still impossible to understand. I tried to focus on the road, focus on the steering wheel, but my mind was scattered. I could no longer distinguish reality from delusions. The voice seemed to want to tell me something, something I didn't want to know. I was beginning to get lost in my own thoughts, and the road, which had once seemed like a refuge, was now an endless nightmare. Then, when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw something that wasn't there before. A shadow, a silhouette, moving behind me, as if someone was inside the truck. I almost stopped breathing. I looked again, but there was nothing. Just the empty road. But the feeling that something was inside me, inside my mind, never went away. I kept driving, faster now, not knowing what was happening, just trying to escape what I couldn't see but was eating me up inside. When I finally reached a gas station, I stopped the truck and got out, shaking. The whispering had stopped, but the feeling that something was still watching me didn't go away. The station was empty, deserted, and there was no one around. I looked back at the path I had taken, hoping to find some sign that it had all been a hallucination, but the road was deserted, as silent as before. Whatever happened that night, the whisper, the voice, I never knew how to explain it. But to this day, whenever I travel at night, whenever the silence of the road comes over me, I get the fear that that voice, that presence, is just waiting to find me again.